live. Welcome back to another episode. We've got Chad and Matt here from TeraGanix, and we're deeply honored to have Laura Decker from the microBIOMETER on with us to talk a little bit about soil health and soil testing today. Want to just kind of set the stage for where we're going to come out with our conversation today. Chad, I'll let you kind of add a little bit of light as well before we dig into it, but we really want to take a chance to kind of set some foundation with Laura as we're really kind of doing some fun work with her on soil testing with a lot of our farmers and our partners, and just really start to set the stage for the biology in the soil, and really take a look at some of the farming practices and how some of our farming practices, especially with conventional farming, might impact our soil, impact that biology, impact the soil health, and then take a nice look at soil testing and just kind of share and do a little roundtable on what we've learned over the past number of months working with our farmers on getting some soil tests done, and why we're now working with Laura on the microBIOMETER.
And so much of the soil test is NPK, and we all talked before this, and so I'm going to tell you our background, how we're going into it. We all felt like there was a gap between maybe there's a optimal way to organically or highly regeneratively farm, and we love those people. We work very well with them, and you know what, Laura, we're gonna hopefully do a follow-up that's a real deep dive where we nerd out. This one is for our conventional guys. This is for the backbone of America, and we're going to go into what's scalable, give me practical insights, the so what of the microbiology, and once we establish the so what and the impacts maybe of different inputs, then we'll get into this is why Laura developed the microBIOMETER. So, does that sound good?
Yep.
Sounds great.
All right.
To kind of kick us off, Laura, I mean, let's maybe just set the stage on what does healthy soil look like?
Well, it depends on where you are. Hi, thanks both for having me on here. I'm really excited to be here. I am Laura Decker. I'm the president of Prolific Earth Sciences, which is a company that makes the microBIOMETER. So we're here to talk about it. Just to let you know, the microBIOMETER is a portable. I always carry it with me. Ooh, it looks like a little lunch box. You could repurpose it that way. It's a little portable test for soil microbiology. We developed it because we saw a need for immediate information about the soil biology. Chad, you mentioned chemical testing. For a very long time, farming, particularly conventional farming, has been very, very reliant on chemistry for growing crops. The Green Revolution in the 50s and 60s was incredibly effective in increasing yield throughout the world, right? Throwing in nitrogen and all kinds of things into the soil to feed the planet, which is wonderful. But what we've discovered since then, it's a little bit too much of a good thing, right? I think we took the needle away from how plants have grown and evolved to grow, and we've sort of made them, my mother who founded the company used to say junk food plants, right? They, chemical fertilizer is like sugar, right? You can feed it to little kids and they'll grow and be crazy, but they won't necessarily be healthy. So I forgot the question already, but that's a little bit about me. Soil health is kind of one of the buzzwords. What does it mean? It means everything and nothing, right? It depends on where you are. And healthy soil, right? Soil is a combination of minerals, chemicals, organic matter, and biology, right? When we talk about biology, we talk about anywhere from microbes to fungi to nematodes to worms to all kinds of things, plants and animals. We know that every plot of land on the planet is an ecosystem. It has a pyramid like this with all kinds of things. We like to think of ourselves at the top of it, right? We can do that if we want. But really, when I work and think about soil, I just stop sort of at worms, right? I'm kind of done thinking about the things that live there on that. So soil biology, soil is a mineral component. It's got a lot of stuff in it. And biology, the microbes and the fungi are the ones that create what we call soil structure. So if you think about highly compacted soil that's sort of dead, right? There's very little air in it. There's no spaces, right? And water just kind of sits on it and then goes right through it, right? So water infiltration is a problem. It's prone to blowing away. It's prone to drought, right? Dries out quite quickly. It doesn't hold water very well. All those living beings in the soil make soil structure, right? Little microbes secrete this sticky substance. They make a little home. They glom onto soil particles. When they die, they leave that space that can get full of air and water, right? Microbes are eaten by fungi, who are eaten by, and I'm not a scientist, so other things in the soil, right? Everything eats everything else. Their dead bodies are left into the soil as organic matter, and it sort of creates this we call it a wonderful world, but I just said everyone was getting eaten, so it's a little tough for everybody there. So soil structure means you have this, and everyone knows, if you're a farmer and you smell and look at your soil, right, you know if it's healthy, right? If it crumbles, if it smells good, if it's got a good taste. And a lot of that structure is driven by biology. And another huge part about soil structure is plants, live roots, dead roots, all kinds of stuff. So I work a lot in the regenerative field, and one of their big mantras, right? No bare earth. There always has to be something growing. And you leave it there. So the roots underground, and if you have good soil structure with microbes, with space, the roots can go far, right? If you have hard compact, the roots go shallow. So you want the roots to go deep, and then when the plant dies, the roots are carbon, organic matter for other things to eat. And when they decay and get eaten, again, more space for water and air, right? So we talk about two things, virtuous and vicious cycle, right? Too much conventional farming is a vicious cycle, right? You put in so many chemicals into the soil that the plant just eats the chemicals, right? It doesn't work on soil structure. And so there's less biology. A virtuous cycle, you start putting in things like EM1 into your soil, right? You start the virtuous soil of building soil structure, organic matter in the soil, and healthy soil. So that was such a long answer, but that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say also it depends on where you are. If you're in the desert, your healthy soil looks different. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Soil on a driveway is beautiful here, right? It's never cold, rains all the time. We have more, fungus everywhere. So it really depends on where you are and where you started.
I think you're going to love this one, Laura, based on your background. There's internal benchmarking and external benchmarking.
Thank you.
You like that?
I love that. This is one of our this is one of our mantras. So benchmarking is tough, right? Everyone wants to know what, we're all products of the American school system, right? We want to get an A, Right. But really, and our test, just so you know, a microbiometer measures soil microbial biomass, fungal to bacteria ratio. And people ask us all the time, well, what should I be? And we're like, it doesn't matter what you should
And you have a range. I love your app. Your app is awesome. Because as soon as I got it, I'm like, okay. I went onto a client site and partner site, and I'm like, how on God's green earth am I going to tell this man if he's got good soil or bad soil? I was so grateful for that. Sorry, but yes, go ahead.
We struggled with that because we're kind of an intellectual company, and we're like, we don't, we kind of felt like we don't want to say anyone is bad soil. You just have a lot more room for improvement. I felt like we were a little bit like kindergartner teachers, like, oh, they're fine, it just could get better, But we had to put that little measure in and it's just an average, and it's really unkind because we sell a lot in Australia, and those poor guys in Australia are always failing.
Doomed.
So we
Yeah.
actually are working on getting a special Australia measure.
It's so funny.
So that they don't feel bad. But what we want to say is all soil is sort of different, and there's a lot of variation in soil from place to place, right? I mean, it's diversity of human life. It's not uniform. But what we want to say is don't worry about what number you have, right? What you want to worry about is the change. So am I putting a TeraGanix product on my soil, like EM1? Am I testing my soil before and then a month later, right? But even 3 or 4 months later, right? Is it taking me up that virtuous cycle so that as time goes on, I'll use those microbes to mine the NPK that's in the soil. There's in a lot of soil that people still fertilize, there is enough in there. But plants are kind of lazy. They can only, with their roots, get some of the nitrogen and phosphorus, and the trace minerals, right? Trace minerals we're discovering in food are equally as important as the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
Plants can only absorb that much directly. They need microbes to make that bioavailable to them. So as you use a product, right, and say your soil structure gets better, right, which means you have to do less irrigating, right? We talked right before the call, about understanding the two sides. We're both finance people, so you can have more money by either spending less or making more, right? They both get you to the same place. Hopefully you're doing both, right? But yield is one way. But if you increase your yield by 10%, but your cost by 30%, you're not doing any better, right? But if you're building soil structure such that you have to put in fewer fertilizers, right, pesticides and herbicides, then over time, one, you'll be more resilient to drought, right? And your input costs will get lower, and your yield hopefully will stay the same at least or get better. And of course, for all the farmers out there, we're certainly hoping that as you do these practices, which are hard, right? It's not simply a matter of putting something different in the hopper and spreading it, that the markets will recognize that you are making a better product and pay you more.
And even if sorry, I know we're collaborating here. Even if the markets aren't valuing based on any quality metrics, let's just say, my personal framework, and I think it's going to align very closely to yours for business in general, is there's revenue, expense, there's risk, and there's cash management. And those are the 4 value drivers to me in a business. So if you're reducing your input cost, that's one thing. Obviously, that's expense, but it's also risk. What if there is an absolute drought? Then you're saving that, right? And again, this is in the spirit of we're talking to conventional guys, but if you focus on your soil health and you focus on that soil structure, drought is a risk that you're managing and mitigating. That subsidized insurance, maybe it's not there forever. Who knows? That's a variable we don't control, right? And so if we don't take this seriously, then is it fair to say that we are exposing ourselves unnecessarily to future risk?
Yeah. And certainly, costs of conventional inputs is one issue, but even availability is an even harder one.
Yeah.
I mean, people know a couple years ago when the Ukraine war started that there was a real scramble to get the things that farmers were relying on and that frankly were effective. But there is sort of another way, and I think we talked about it before. I like regenerative because it used to be, there was conventional and organic, right? And they were like, organic was thou shalt not, right? There are certain things you just couldn't do, or you tainted everything for 10 years, Whereas regenerative is just sort of, let's make incremental steps that make sense over time, right? With the goal of reducing chemical farming, right? In a way that is both environmentally friendly, but also fiscally friendly, right? Lots of people make their money in farming. It's an incredibly difficult way to make a living, and it's shockingly risky. I mean, I know there's insurance, but first of all, it's always up in Congress for all kinds of stuff, which has got to be just a whole nother thing. And so, I think everyone's sort of there, and also the food supply. Like, we would like a more resilient food supply throughout the world. And, as information comes up about sort of, the food, the food that you grow sort of regeneratively and with more biology is possibly healthier or more palatable to the consumer, you could get a premium for that. I mean, yeah, I want it to work without the premium, but I think if farmers are doing all this work, yeah, they should get paid for it. They're not volunteers.
I agree. Yeah, but that's the icing on the cake. It's got to work before that. Well, yeah, we all agree. Yeah.
And that's the same way we feel about carbon. I feel about carbon farming, right? If you're doing a lot of regenerative practices and building soil biology and soil carbon and soil organic matter, right? Those are carbon credits. Now, the carbon market is insane. I don't want to talk about it because it makes me want to, watch reality TV. But ideally, if you would say to a farmer, look, you're growing food, you're being responsible, you're sequestering carbon, we're going to pay you not just for the food, but for the premium, for the quality of the food it is, and for the carbon that you are putting into the soil that we are burning up in our cars every day. But that would just be my dream for them. They could all drive around in, Mercedes. They could be like the stockbrokers.
The incremental change or net benefit to your soil life. It sounds like, and it probably would vary a lot by soil type, by farm, that impact, and maybe that's why they need a meter.
Yeah. So what our meter does is you take some field moist, fresh soil from right around where roots are growing, which is where microbes like to live, and you test it, right? And all it tells you right at that point is a somewhat arbitrary number of the number of living and dormant microbes and fungi you have in the soil at that given point. Microbes are living beings. They dry out and they die. And so if you dry it or put it in a bag for 2 weeks or, freeze it or make it too hot, it will change, right? It's a different community. So one of our big tenets is you're testing, like if you caught a fish, you would weigh it right then and there, right? Not 2 weeks later to see how big it was. You'd see how big your fish was at the time. So you measure it and you get a number. Our test gives a number between 200 and we've seen numbers as high as 2,800, right? So you get sort of this number in fungal to bacteria ratio. And then you say, okay, I want to get better. I mean, usually. And a lot of people say, okay, I'm gonna, put down nitrogen. What happens, right? I put down a lot too much nitrogen, we know does deter the microbial community. If your soil needs nitrogen and you don't put down enough, maybe it also goes down. So it's one of those things that I'm sad to say you sort of have to experiment on. And there's a lot of factors. So a lot of farmers are doing sort of test plots, or they're titering things like, okay, if I have 2 fields, maybe I'm going to do one slightly different than the other. And you don't look at the absolute numbers, you look at the change, right? Because a field might naturally be lower or higher than another field. But you say, okay, I tested them on the same day, and then I did slightly different treatments to the 2 of them. In 2 months, what did it look like, right? Did one do much better than the other? And then you build your knowledge base of how your soil in your particular land with your particular practices handles. There is sadly not some magical formula yet. Maybe AI will come up with one where, anyone could come in and tell you exactly what to do to make, the best decisions.
Yeah.
But there never has been, so that's not new.
What's maybe one of, or if you've got 2 or 3 just kind of top of mind, just kind of examples that you've seen maybe over the past year of like soil health turnarounds, like people that have been using the biometer and first test was, the benchmark, and then, as far as internal benchmarking have, really kind of seen that turnaround, and, just kind of curious what that looked like for them, and what practices they took, and just kind of some practical
Yeah, we have,
implementation there that
look at
you've
this,
seen.
look at this high-tech graphic that I have here. Look at this. It's really impressive. This is a graph of someone who used biochar, which is another product. And they did exactly what we said, is they built two graphs. And seasonality, things change. So this is the lower one is without treatment, and the upper one is with treatment. So you can see in spring, summer, it goes down, and then it following up. And what this tells you is this is the gain that was made, right, in soil health and microbial community. Now, the yield and the spreadsheets will tell you if it was more profitable, but we're making the assumption that if your soil health improves, those things will follow. And this was a very small scale sort of, this is blueberries, I forgot where, somewhere, of just sort of, a little test plot of things that are happening.
So building soil health does take time, and you just showed the internal benchmarking year over year, and you explained the variance in winter. So that's extremely helpful. And
And there's also variances throughout the growing cycle. Like some crops, when they go to fruit, will like any organism will start feeding its children and not its friends, right? So some crops have dips that seem odd. So what we always tell people is, microbe community, if you're doing the right stuff, won't always just go up. It will vary naturally, right? So you have to understand both the natural variation and then sort of the man-made variation of what you're doing to it. And that takes time as well. And a dry year will be different than a wet year.
help us with the so what of the fungi to bacteria ratio.
Yeah. So fungal to bacteria was interesting because we came out with a microBIOMETER, and then through all this work, they discovered ART test only works in actual soil. It relies on pigmentation that microbes pick up in natural soil. So if you're growing in sort of compost that has no soil component to it, or in hydroponics, or in some other, a lot of greenhouses grow not in natural soil, it doesn't work. It will give you a reading, but it's picking up other colors that are not valid. As we were doing this, we discovered that the fungi and the bacteria show up slightly differently. So we said, oh, good, let's put that in. That's really interesting. People like that. And some people went insane, okay? So what we've discovered is that, so there's a lot more bacteria than there are fungi. Fungi eat the bacteria, but fungi are much bigger. They have long hyphae. They build a lot of soil structure. And there's evidence that, I just read about it vaguely, so don't quiz me about it, that fungal content does a lot about plant immunity. And a plant with a really strong immune system has more antioxidants in it. And the reason we have to eat kale is to eat antioxidants because it helps our immune system, right? So you can go down that rabbit hole if you want. I'm just sort of saying what's been said. So fungal to bacteria is really important to people. And then also people who grow specialty crops. So we're talking wine and cannabis, right? Things that when they talk about terroir, hopefully I'm saying it right, that the plant has a different taste and smell profile because of where it is. There's a lot of evidence that it's the fungi that sort of inhabit that. And then fungal content brings a lot of soil structure. It's also the first thing to kind of get destroyed in tilling, right? Because they're big and you could just chop them up. So a lot of people use it as sort of a measure of, even if my content is low, if my fungal to bacteria are fairly well balanced, they're on the right track. But again, it's something that varies over time and place. But that most growers are looking for at least a 1-to-1, but very, very serious hobby medicinal growers are looking for 10-to-1 ratio. Because of course you can go to the store and buy mycorrhizal fungi, dump it all over your plant inside and get it to go really high. So again, fungal to bacteria is another sort of measure It's a ratio, it's an approximation, it's one of those numbers that varies. But a lot of people who are into soil structure and the taste and the flavor profile are quite keen to boost their fungal content.
Every one of them has done a soil sample analysis. I mean, the NPK, and then on down the list of macro and micronutrients in a lot of cases, right? And that's mainstream. And what's really unique is to have, even though it doesn't get into the NPK of biology, at least a freaking indicator. And there's visual aids to Laura's kind of point of there might be exceptions. There's visual aids. If it's not producing, you got a problem. But at least we have something. And that's what I thought was so cool about their sample, that you can do in, I think, 30 to 40 minutes. I mean, you can, and a lot of that's wait time.
It's 20 minutes, yeah.
If you're as slow as me, it's 40, but 20 for everybody else. You can come directly to TeraGanix. We carry the microBIOMETER. We carry EM1. You can measure difference against it. Reach out to us. We develop custom protocols. We sell black ink, not red. That being said, you can also go direct to microBIOMETER. We love them, and go talk to them. Say, hey, I saw you on this, and you know what? I'm sure they'll give you a discount that's very similar.
And I'll
love
also
it either
say
way.
that we manufacture this ourselves here in Washington State, so this is not a product that's made far away. I am the president of the company, and my job is to make these little salt packets. So, on the list of boring things to do, that's mine. But it is made in the U.S., and we love our distributors because, frankly, they're a little bit better about getting things shipped off on time. So either way is good. And if you use us, please send us good, bad, ugly feedback. You can go to our website and write us directly. We like to hear about people, and we particularly like to hear about it if you're using us with EM1, about the story. We love to put people on your newsletter and just do shout outs. So thank you. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. It's fun.
Yeah.